Who is Professor Howard Gardner? Professor Howard Gardner is an American cognitive psychologist, author of multiple intelligences theory. His conception of intelligence inspired educators all over the world to understand that there are many ways to be intelligent beyond the traditional verbal and mathematical skills, so appreciate that skill. He is Professor of Cognition and Education at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. In 1967, he was a founding member of Harvard Project Zero, a research group initially focused on understanding the nature of artistic knowledge. Since the middle 1990s, he has directed the Good Project that promotes excellence, engagement, and ethics in education, preparing students to become good workers and good citizens who contribute to the overall well-being of society. He has written over 30 books, translated into 32 languages, and several hundred articles. Among the many awards he received, the last ones were the Prince of Asturias Award for Social Sciences in 2011, the Brock International Prize in Education in 2015, and the Distinguished Contributions to Research in Education Award in 2020, the premier honor from the American Education Research Association.
Though I'm not quite 90 years old yet, I realized this past weekend I wouldn't be able to give a substantive and substantial talk in this heat. Fortunately, we have wonderful colleagues here at the Graduate School of Education. They found a solution. They enabled me to video my remarks. And so, with the rest of you, I will sit back, fan myself, and listen to my talk, hoping I might learn something. And with my wife and daughter here, occasionally smiling at my feeble attempts at humor, as they have humored me for many years. The video includes my whole talk, but if after 18 minutes I feel I can present my concluding remarks live, and I think I'll be able to, I will signal that and return to the podium. But for now, let the video roll. Thank you. Positioned here in front of you all in my 81st year, I can't help taking a trip down memory lane. I first walked through Radcliffe Yard as a college freshman in 1961, began to work in Longfellow Hall, just behind all of you, in 1967, almost 60 years ago. Ever since '67, this site, the cluster of neo-Georgian buildings, has been my working home. My graduate training was in developmental psychology, not in education proper, but education has been central, as it has been for so many of you, for almost all of my waking life. Indeed, almost all human beings have been involved in education, formal or informal, from preschool to post-retirement for much of their lives. Moreover, to the point, all of you who are graduating have decided that education will remain central in your life, though the ways you're involved in education and that your families have and will be involved in education will differ and will necessarily change over time. I invite you to reflect why you went into education, what you hope to achieve for yourself and for others, for next week and for decades from now, maybe even for over 60 years. That's the focus of my talk today. As my starting point, I've chosen two well-known adages, almost cliches. I know them in English, but I'm sure that they exist in many other languages as well. I dub them continuity and change. There's nothing new under the sun. That's continuity. You can never step in the same river twice. That's change. There may have been some societies that have stayed relatively stable or constant, but that's almost never true nowadays. And certainly those of you who have a half century or more in education to look forward to, you can expect multitudinous changes. Almost anyone in the vicinity of a news feed will certainly be alerted to the ubiquity and speed of change, the advent of new technologies and of powerful computational systems, of which ChatGPT is the one that educators most often think about nowadays, the advent of increasingly destructive climate change, which can be denied only by the most ostrich-like, the radical shift in governmental systems, both within countries and around the world, a situation which most of us find disconcerting, even alarming. Not to say that all change is frightening. Advances in literacy, healthcare, longevity are notable as well. And an increasing part of the world is the beneficiary of medical and technological advances. So that's change. What about continuity, stability, and longer arcs of familiarity? It's more challenging in 2024 to come up with a convincing list, but here are some likely candidates for continuity. The stability of the universe. At least for the next few million years, we hope that any expansion or contraction will be essentially undetectable. The stability of our solar system and the planets and moons closest to us, especially in terms of their basic chemistry and their physics. Rocket setter Elon Musk is counting on that stability. Relatedly, closer to home, night and day and night. As I said, the sun looms over little that is new. What about human biology? At least until recently, that's been stable for millennia, though with genetic experimentation, that could change. CRISPR is a powerful technology for genetic manipulation, entailing both risks and benefits. Also, the length of the life cycle, while extending gradually, is not very different from biblical times. As some of you know, my nickname is Methuselah, and I have few hundred and 900 years to catch up with Methuselah. There's even continuity in human biology. Most of us can recognize familiar individuals and familiar conflicts and crises in the writings of the Greeks, of Shakespeare, of Herman Melville, or Toni Morrison. And those who know other cultural traditions, Confucian, Islamic, Native American, Black American, can also recognize many of the same facets of the human condition. All celebrate similar rites of passage. Entire cultures, modern and ancient, homogeneous or heterogeneous, deal with the same issues: good and bad leaders, equity, lack of equity, crime and punishment, love, hatred, life and death, comedy and tragedy. Hey, Howard, you're almost halfway through your talk and you barely touched on education. What gives? The clock is ticking. Research documents that the average individual can only focus on a video segment for 7 or 8 minutes. But you're an extraordinary group, as signified by the degrees that Dean Long will present to you in less than 24 hours. And because you're extraordinary, I suspect you may well have anticipated the theme of my talk. All of us in education, whether teaching preschool or mentoring postdocs, whether assuming the roles of teacher, administrator, tutor, legislator, entrepreneur, even lifelong students, whether working in Singapore or Cincinnati, in Hollywood or Harlem, all of us need to be able to monitor and deal with the continuities in education, even as we have to be able to monitor the changes and seek to deal with them as adroitly, as thoughtfully, as fairly and successfully as possible. So let me take some examples from my own research carried out over the last 6 decades at Project Zero, mostly in Longfellow Hall. What we've learned, 3 lines of research. Number 1, the arts. The arts used to be thought of as entertainment, just pleasure. We demonstrated that the arts are highly cognitive as well, involving thinking, problem solving, problem finding, and especially creating something new. Even a powerful computer program that can create artwork that is stunning by no way means that we human beings should abandon the arts. In fact, we should pursue them even more. After all, just because a car can go faster than we can, we still race, especially in mid-April in Boston. Just because a powerful computer can beat a champion at press, that doesn't mean we no longer engage in that board game. Area number 2, intelligence. 60 years ago, there was a widespread belief that intelligence is a fixed, single capacity, on which all human beings can be aligned, and my fellow psychologists could tell you your life chances based solely on your IQ score. Now, thanks to our own work and that of colleagues like Dan Goleman, who writes about emotional intelligence, most of us realize that human beings have multiple intelligences. These can be discovered, built up, they're not fixed. Intelligences can be enhanced, and they can be used in new ways. And perhaps working together with smart machines, we can accomplish what not even the writers of science fiction in my childhood could even have imagined with multiple human and computational intelligences. Which brings me to area of work number 3, our most sustained work on ethics and morality. What does it mean to be a good worker and to do good work in our time? As we've discovered, good work consists of 3 elements. It's technically excellent, the worker knows her stuff. It's engaging, the worker looks forward to work and to its projects, and it's carried out in an ethical way, in a way that avoids unnecessary harm to others. In fact, it tries to achieve the core values of the profession. 3 E's: excellence, engagement, and ethics. Initially, most of our studies of good work were with adult professionals. We studied over 1,000 good workers in some detail. But in recent years, we've developed a curriculum in ethics for middle and secondary school. That's been posted and has in fact been translated into Chinese, Portuguese, Spanish, and Japanese, and is being used worldwide. The winning combination: multiple intelligences mobilized for good ends. I repeat, the winning combination: multiple intelligences mobilized for good ends. But we now realize that ethics and morality begin much younger, when as human beings we begin to think of I or me, or also of we or us, and whether we begin to take into account the needs and desires of others, the larger collectivity. And so we've dubbed this new work with very young children Good Starts, en route to becoming good workers and good citizens. So I hope you take away 3 formulations. Number 1, the arts engage the human mind. 2, we have a range of intelligences. Number 3, good work features excellence, engagement, and ethics, and it should start early in life. All of his lines of work could have been investigated in earlier times. That's continuity. But they can and should be revisited frequently in terms of what we know today and what we'll learn tomorrow. That's change. So that's research. What about teaching? I want to talk again about my own teaching and our own teaching, what's continuous and what can be changed. 40 years ago, I was hired to teach developmental psychology at Hugsy, and for a while I did that myself. But then I joined forces with another developmental psychologist of a quite different stripe, Kurt Fisher. I focused on cognitive development. He focused on social and emotional development. I was more qualitative in methods. He was more quantitative. When we first taught, we each lectured for most of the time and then posed and answered questions. But then around 1990, before most of you were born, there was a new technology. Harvard introduces video recording, which I'm taking advantage of today. Kurt and I recorded all of our lectures in advance. Believe me, it's no fun to stand alone and talk to cameras for dozens of hours, but we did this because it freed class time for discussion and debate. After a few years, we were joined by David Rose, a clinically knowledgeable educational entrepreneur who'd launched a nonprofit startup called CAST, presumably known to many of you. CAST delivers a wonderful message. We shouldn't speak of people as learning disabled. We should instead focus on curricula that is disabled and enable these curricula to work with the range of students. We 3 of us taught together, no more lectures. We discussed themes with one another, then with the class. Discussion continued with teaching fellows, some of whom are today outstanding scholars. That struck me as a great way to teach, one that's not easily replicated online, walking up and down the aisles of Asquith Hall, and after class spilling over to the Gutman cafeteria or the sunken garden behind you. The heart of education is thoughtful teacher-educators interacting with one another and with students, as old as Plato's Republic, as contemporary as computer-based flipped classes. To be sure, Much today can be replicated online, even asynchronously. But just as listening to a concert on the radio can't be equated with sitting in Symphony Hall, which can't be equated with playing in an orchestra, so too, team teaching and discussion that's live can and should remain for a long time at its best. It's a flow or peak experience, teaching and working with colleagues. So let me take a deep breath. Change, lots of it. Email, blogs, asynchronous online classes, ChatGPT, they boggle the mind of this 80-year-old. Continuity, what's really important, what's enduring, what methods, what messages are tried and true. So in my peroration, the concluding portion of a classical speech, let me state explicitly what I've sought to convey today. In any domain, and especially in one that will always be important to human life, whatever turns it takes, there will be both continuities, there's nothing new under the sun, and discontinuities. You can never step in the same river twice. I've suggested some physical, chemical, biological, and psychological continuities, and I've suggested as well the human developmental, cultural, and technological options that have arisen in our time, which going forward is your time. Keep them all in mind, share them with friends and family, discuss them with coworkers at various stages and ranks, introduce them in age-appropriate and domain-appropriate ways to your students. Perhaps even make them the topic of a course. Whether you see students in person every day, once a week, live in a virtual course, or perhaps a course prepared for Khan Academy or for edX. Revisit them as much as you can, because what's changing cannot be predicted, and if you reach the age and stage that I have reached, I hope that you do, and indeed extend beyond that age, share whatever wisdom you have accumulated and excuse any foolishness. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I know that I spoke fast and probably should have spoken slower. That's the difference between recording something and doing it live. And in a sense, the experience of the last few days is an example of continuity and change. Because when I first came to these parts, the notion of videoing something and showing it with captions would have been unthinkable. On the other hand, there's also continuity, because as we saw throughout this afternoon, there's something special about live people getting up in front of an audience, putting themselves a little bit at risk of getting tongue-tied or not being well received, and having some back and forth, and even as we saw earlier, some tension around statements which were edgy. But I want to conclude with wise words from two predecessors on this campus. 60 years ago, when I just completed college, my own teacher, psychologist and educator Jerome Bruner, created a social studies course for middle schoolers, and I was one of the people who helped to develop that course. The course was organized around 3 questions. Number 1, what makes human beings human? Number 2, how did we become that way? Number 3, so much in the spirit of earlier talks, how can we be made more so? How can we be made more human, more humane? It was these questions that brought me into education in the middle 1960s. I recommend that every once in a while you ask yourself and your friends and your colleagues and your students, what makes human beings human? How did we become that way? And how can we become more human, more humane, more love, and less factionalism? Finally, over a century ago, words of wisdom from American historian Henry Adams. Henry Adams remarked, "A teacher affects eternity. He," and we would now say, they never know when their influence ends. Let me repeat and rewrite. Educators affect eternity. They never know when their influence ends. May your influence endure. Thank you, class of 2024, and congratulations. Thank you.